some of the biggest problems that I've seen on going through a claim, or by the corollary, some of the claims that I've seen be the most successful, that have really optimized it, that have squeezed every dollar out of it, captured really, in my view, all of the supporting activities, not just the obvious activities, tend to have some common themes. The first is they don't leave the documentation to just one person. If there's a 4 or 5 person research team, they will all try to contribute to the documentation process. To do this, they want to be able to rank the technological uncertainties. So a crack team may identify 60, 70, 80 technological uncertainties, at which point I'm saying that's too much. What the Canada Revenue Agency would say is it's great that you can do that, but now we want you as professional engineers or scientists or developers to use your professional judgment and take those 70 uncertainties that you identified and rank them. They'll say rank them in what you perceive to be their order of technological significance and tell us about the top 5. Okay? So again, we'll focus on the executive summary there. And if you can provide 3 to 5, that's the magic number. Ultimately, that will allow you to provide what the CRA says is both in the claimant's interest and the agency's, which is conciseness and brevity. They don't want the 40-page PhD thesis. They want it boiled down to how many different alternatives, why were those relevant, what did you learn? So the first of the common problems that I've seen is no definition of standard practice. I represent this with no square. We may have uncertainties identified, lots of work being done, but very often, just as our example here that we've cited, CRA can come back and say, well, you know what, I've seen things at other plants like this. I don't know where they got them, but you tell me. The onus is now back on you. I know it exists. Yeah, maybe those guys made it themselves as proprietary, but I don't know. So if you can show me that you took reasonable steps before you did it, no problem. In the absence of that supporting documentation, again, you may have no basis for a claim. And sadly, I've seen a lot of very large projects, hundreds of thousands of dollars, with very skilled engineers, world-class engineers, get bounced for exactly that reason. So it's a really important step, and it's not intuitively obvious. We'll talk about why at the end. The most common reason, I've got this as number 2 slide, but the most common reason that you'll see the Canada Revenue Agency on the technology side deny a claim is called routine engineering. They'll just say, we think this project was routine engineering. And basically, what that means to me is that you got it on the first or second try, and the second try was really fine-tuning type deals, 1 or 2 variables. So again, if you have a very skilled person, professional engineer, PhD type, doing something that sounds really complicated, it may start to sound really good, but ultimately if they're getting it on the first try, the CRA is quite likely to come back and say, you're so clever, this looks like it's well within the bounds of your standard practice, which is why there was no experimentation. Okay? No experimentation indicates it's within standard practice. Now we're going to do a quick little test here to apply some of this knowledge. If everyone can very quickly, without yelling out the answer, because we'll do it with a show of hands, skim these 4 lines of text and tell me how many times you think the letter F appears. I know you're saying, hey, no one told me there'd be a quiz here. All right, everyone had a chance? How many people saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, I'd say the median's about 4. There's actually 6. I've actually done this test for a long time now. So those of you who've been in the course before, you may have remembered this. But what I've found, and psychologists know this test has been around since the 60s, is that different kinds of clients that I have, I can already tell before I give them the test what the answer is going to be. The people that are speed readers, guys that read 1,000 words a minute, that just skim pages, they're always going to see 3, all the time, every single time. Because what they don't understand is their brain, they don't really read words. They read paragraphs. They scan things. And to do this, your mind shuts off words like if and of. It completely ignores them. And that becomes so strong a habit that even when you ask them, their mind will suppress that kind of information. If instead, I remember when my son was in kindergarten, I gave him this one and he found all 6. And again, it's the opposite of what you think. The faster people read, the more likely they are to see that. And you're saying, well, that's great, Dave, but how does this apply to what we're talking about? And what I'm saying is that in SR&ED, it's really the same thing. Once you have a solution, now that you go back, anyone who caught 3 or 4, more than half the room didn't count the 6, you'll go back and say, oh, wow, that's so obvious. I can't believe I missed that. And you don't really even want to go explain why after. A year later, when I'm saying, hey, tell me all the mistakes that you did, often the developer's saying, well, you know what? Now that I developed this, I'm thinking I should have thought of this 20 years ago. It's so obvious in retrospect. Do I really want to tell the boss all the stupid things that I did, all the bumbling blind alleys I went down before the obvious solution that should have slapped me right in the face? And again, this sounds funny, but there's a lot of psychology to that, to say, well, if you think that way, then again, it's going to be harder because the people who did the experimentation aren't motivated to actually tell you what happened. And again, often to pull these together, it's as much psychology. How do I convince that person it's really in everyone's interest for them to tell us about the failed attempts, what they learned to get to the answer? Because the CRA says that SR&ED is the process to get to the answer, not the final answer. What did you do? What methods did you look at? And what did you learn along the way to get to the answer that represents the technological advancement? Another very prevalent problem is activities beyond someone's qualifications. And there's the obvious one where they just say you're not qualified to do SR&ED, but I'd say even in very successful claimants, this one pops up quite a bit, particularly in the area of software. Because most large companies, it doesn't matter what they do, it could be plastics or aeronautics or air distribution or you name it. At some point, they start to develop software to do pricing or to do something within their system, and their response to me is always, well, Dave, we figure we're really great aeronautical engineers, but we don't really know much about software, so it's all advancement to us. And they're dead set serious when they say that. So having gone through the analysis of the rule so far, can anyone see a problem with that position or that the CRA could poke at there?
It's available anywhere. You can buy the software.
Well, yeah, it could be the square itself. Did you check off the shelf? Yeah. Any other issues? Well, the qualification of your staff. Just because, and I've seen these examples in real life. A great example I had was a medical, I won't talk too long about it, but a medical doctor who did work on obstetrics and hired a software person to try different algorithms to see how they could compress ultrasound images and still get readable, accurate diagnosis on the other end. And at first they claimed it as a software advancement. The client originally claimed it before they came to me, and it got bounced because the software guy said correctly, you're just applying off-the-shelf algorithms and look at what happened. But what it really was an advancement in medicine, and software was a supporting activity there. What we were doing is saying, how can we take an existing science of reading an ultrasound, what parts of it can we lose so that we can still make an accurate diagnosis? And when we brought a medical reviewer in, they agreed wholeheartedly that this was an advancement in medicine and that there was no off-the-shelf solution for that. So again, just because a doctor's qualified to do work in medicine does not make him or her qualified to do software development. Okay? You're trained in a field of science or technology, and you can do research in that field, but that does not make you qualified now to do research in every field of science and technology. It sounds obvious in retrospect, but it gets missed an awful lot, just like that in that example. The good news there is when we restructured it, the claim actually went up by 600%. The fourth of the most common documentation problems that I see is what we call trial and error versus systematic investigation. So the courts have said things like systematic investigation involves extremely accurate measurements. So again, when the CRA is suspect about the time or cost or whether the work was even eligible, they will start asking for evidence of, show me your calculations, show me your measurements and analysis. And where taxpayers can provide these, it tends to go okay. If many taxpayers follow certain criteria, and if you follow the idea of doing work in your head, certain industries like tool and die or machinery tend to follow that. An owner may go out on the shop floor and do 8 different prototypes right there and really be analyzing different variables. What about rigidity? What about chatter? And making judgment calls, but not recording any of it. And taking all the prototypes and throwing them in the scrap bin without taking pictures, without taking photographs, without taking evidence. The CRA will take any form of evidence. They'll take stuff written on napkins, I've seen them take things written in different languages. As long as you could explain, how the diagrams are working, they'll tend to accept that. They don't tell you how to do your research. They're just saying, keep evidence of hypothesis, analysis, and conclusions. So if you can do that, if you can provide that, it tends to be very easy. Okay, there's a new project format that came out at the end of 2008. It has certain word limits. The back part of your course, the T1.2s, there's 4 different project descriptions, and they're all submitted within that claim format. We're going to look at it from a free-form format, and then what it would look like within the form itself. But basically, they now require who prepared the form and who the key employees were for each of the projects, so the people that they want to talk to. There's no longer any attachments, so you can't send pictures or drawings or diagrams or notes with the description now, although there are ways to work around that. What we find is that before we submit, it's a great idea to do something called a key criteria summary. So we talked about the 3 main areas of the claim and the 5 components within there that I like to see, and that if any of those are missing, there's a potential problem. So again, what we like to do is take a quick summary to ensure that did we benchmark the technology, did we define the uncertainties and correlate the work with it, and did we give conclusions on those uncertainties, at least one conclusion, at the end of the day.